What if the very thing that makes you feel safe is also what slowly pulls you into silence? There's a strange tension buried deep inside many of us, especially those who find peace in their own company. You love the quiet, the space, the clarity that only comes when the noise fades away. But sometimes in the middle of that stillness comes a flicker, a hollow feeling you didn't expect, a quiet ache for someone to understand you. Not to talk, not to entertain, just to be there. And that's the paradox. You crave solitude, yet somewhere beneath that craving is the undeniable pull of connection. You shut the door to the world, but sometimes you hope someone knocks anyway. This isn't a flaw, it's not confusion, it's the human experience, compressed into a single contradiction, the longing to be left alone and the deeper longing to be found. Arthur Schopenhauer described it best through the parable of the hedgehogs. On a freezing night, they huddle together for warmth, but the closer they get, the more they stab each other with their spines. So they retreat, only to shiver in the cold. So they return and get hurt again, until finally they find a distance just close enough to share warmth, but not too close to bleed. That is the life of the introvert. Close is comforting, but too close can feel like drowning. And so we develop a strange rhythm, one where we decline invitations we secretly wish we could say yes to, one where we need people, but only in doses so small they sometimes go unnoticed. And that rhythm can become a trap. The more we retreat, the harder it becomes to reach out. And the harder it is to reach out, the lonelier we become. Until solitude is no longer a sanctuary, it becomes a self-made exile. When was the last time you truly enjoyed your own company without reaching for your phone? That question isn't meant to judge. It's meant to remind that even in the quiet, there's a voice beneath the silence asking not just to be left alone, but to be remembered. You can feel invisible in a crowd and overwhelmed in a conversation. You can feel independent, but quietly hope someone texts you just to say, "I see you." And yet somehow it's in this contradiction that something powerful begins to emerge, a lesson no one ever teaches, but life keeps reminding us of. That being alone and being connected aren't enemies. They're two halves of the same need to feel whole. You can hold space for your own thoughts while still aching to be understood. That ache isn't weakness, it's proof you still believe in something more than yourself. So if you've ever felt torn between peace and people, between craving the quiet and needing to be seen, welcome. You're not lost, you're just standing in the space where most of us live, but few of us admit. The space between alone and not quite free. And if this already feels like your story, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else is living this paradox too. And maybe, just maybe, they need to hear this today. Solitude isn't the absence of life, it's the space where life quietly unfolds. In a world obsessed with constant noise, choosing silence feels almost rebellious. Choosing your own company, radical. But introverts have always known something most people miss, that there's a kind of magic only found in aloneness. Not loneliness, not isolation, but intentional solitude, the kind that sharpens you. It's where your real thoughts emerge, not the ones shaped by the world, but the ones whispered in your own voice. Solitude is where ideas are born, where creativity wakes up, where your emotional batteries finally get a chance to charge. The Stoics believed that solitude wasn't just healthy, it was necessary. Seneca once wrote that a strong mind reveals itself when a person can sit in silence and enjoy their own company. In other words, if you can stand being alone with your own thoughts, you've already won a battle most people don't even know they're fighting. But this wisdom doesn't just belong to the West. Taoist sages retreated into the mountains not to escape society, but to see it more clearly. Han Shan, the cold mountain poet, lived in a cave above the clouds and wrote of leaping the world's net. He wasn't running from life, he was stepping outside of it, just far enough to see the threads others missed. Because when you step away from the world, that's when you really begin to understand it. And here's the twist most people don't expect. Solitude, real solitude, doesn't isolate you from people. It prepares you for them. Studies show that when people are comfortable being alone, they often come back into the world with more empathy, more calm, more depth. It's like a reset button. You enter clearer, more grounded, less performative, more you. It's no wonder that some of the most brilliant breakthroughs, scientific, artistic, even spiritual, came not from crowded rooms, but from solitary moments. Glenn Gould, the genius pianist, gave up live performances at the peak of his fame. Why? Because he said true happiness required isolation. Alone in the studio, away from the audience, he created music that was hauntingly transcendent, not despite the solitude, but because of it. Solitude can be so powerful, it actually increases our sense of connection afterward. One study found that people who intentionally spend time alone report feeling more connected when they re-enter social spaces, not less. It's the paradox in reverse. Being alone can make you better at being with people. And yet, this only works when solitude is a choice. That's the line most people miss. Solitude that you choose, that's strength. Solitude that chooses you, that's a warning. It takes courage to be alone, and it takes just as much to admit when you've had enough of it. There's no medal for suffering in silence. The point of solitude isn't to disappear, it's to return with something worth bringing back. Because in the end, the art of being alone is not about isolation, it's about becoming such a grounded, whole version of yourself that when you finally let someone in, they're not meeting your mask, they're meeting you, and if that sounds like a rare thing in this world, it is. But that's why it's worth protecting. Sometimes solitude feels like safety until it doesn't. There's a moment, often invisible, when what once felt like a sanctuary begins to feel like a cell. You still follow the same habits, quiet evenings, no phone calls, space to think. But something has shifted. You feel it in your chest, a kind of dull pressure, not panic, just absence. Not the absence of people, but the absence of being known. And this is where the paradox deepens. You love being alone, but you miss being understood. You don't need crowds or parties or spotlight conversations. You just want to look someone in the eyes and not have to explain everything. You just want someone to notice when you go quiet. You just want one person who says, "You don't have to say anything. I get it." The irony, the people most drawn to solitude often feel loneliness the most sharply when it shows up. Because when you know how to be alone, you feel its edges, you notice its shift. You feel the ache of isolation, not as noise, but as a kind of silence that gets louder with time. And it's not just emotional, it's biological. According to the US Surgeon General, prolonged disconnection can be as harmful to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That number isn't a metaphor, it's real. Loneliness doesn't just break your heart metaphorically, it actually weakens the heart, raises stress levels, shortens lifespans. And for those who spend more time in their own minds than in others' company, the impact can go unnoticed until it becomes a constant undertone in the background of your life. But here's what most people miss. Loneliness doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're wired correctly. The ache beneath the silence is your brain's way of saying, you weren't meant to do this alone forever. It's not a weakness, it's a flare. That ache doesn't ask for popularity. It doesn't beg for followers or fans. What it really asks for is something simpler, belonging. Not the kind you find in crowds, but the kind you find in someone who makes you feel safe just by being there. That's why one deep friendship can sometimes heal years of surface-level connection. One conversation, one honest moment can snap you out of the fog and remind you you're not invisible, you're not strange, you're just rare, and you've been waiting to be found by someone who sees what others missed. This is where many people start to slip, right here, in this chapter of their lives, because it gets easy to believe the ache is just your new normal. You stop reaching out. You convince yourself that you've outgrown everyone, or that you're too complex to be understood. But really, you're just tired of being misread. You've been burned by shallow connections, so now you fear depth too. But cutting yourself off doesn't prevent pain, it just guarantees it. You don't need 100 people, you don't need noise, you just need someone who makes you feel like your quiet isn't a burden. And sometimes that someone is still out there, also wondering if they're the only one who feels this way, also hoping they're not too much, or too little, or too silent. You don't have to solve the ache. You just have to stop pretending it isn't there, because healing begins the moment you admit that you want to be found. You were never meant to choose between solitude and connection. You were meant to master both. Life isn't asking you to pick a side. It's asking you to hold the tension, to walk the line between your quiet world and the messy, beautiful presence of others, to be both grounded in yourself and open enough to let someone in. That's not balance, that's bravery. The truth is, introverts often feel torn, not because they're confused, but because they feel everything so clearly. They know what it's like to be depleted by shallow company, but they also know what it's like to ache for one deep moment of real human presence. The answer isn't in picking one and abandoning the other. It's in building a bridge, an intentional space where solitude and belonging don't compete, they complete. Rainer Maria Rilke said that the highest form of love is when two people guard each other's solitude, not fill each other, not fix each other, guard as in protect. That kind of connection is rare and powerful. It's not about merging, it's about dancing close enough to feel seen while still leaving room to breathe. And it's not just poetic, it's psychological. Erich Fromm believed the ability to be alone is the foundation for the ability to love. Because love that grows out of fear of loneliness isn't love, it's dependency. And dependency is not connection, it's a mask for emptiness. The ones who do it differently, the ones who can sit alone in peace and still show up with full presence in someone else's life, those are the ones who create real relationships. Relationships that aren't built on need, but on choice. Not on escape, but on expansion. That's the introvert's hidden power, not to avoid connection, but to elevate it, to make it more sacred, more intentional, more human. Think of a forest. Each tree grows in its own space, alone, independent, but underground, they're connected by a network, a hidden system that shares nutrients, warning signals, and strength. That's not dependence, that's belonging. Or think of a lone wolf. That image gets romanticized, a symbol of independence, but in reality, wolves don't stay alone. They search, they wander, and eventually they bond. They find a pack, and once they do, they don't let go. Solitude and connection aren't opposites, they're partners. And when you move between them with awareness, your life becomes rhythm. A life where you can retreat without disappearing. A life where you can connect without losing your center. But that rhythm takes practice, because sometimes you'll be tempted to vanish and other times you'll be tempted to people please just to feel safe. In both cases, you lose yourself. The way forward is different. It's not about becoming more social. It's not about becoming more withdrawn. It's about becoming more you, the kind of you that knows when to step back and knows when to step forward. That knows silence isn't an absence, but a preparation. That knows presence isn't noise, it's a gift. That's the bridge you were born to build. The path that only a few ever learn to walk. And if you can find that rhythm, you won't just belong to the world, you'll belong to yourself. Let me know when you're ready for the final 2 chapters. There's a quiet kind of danger that comes from getting too good at being alone. At first it's harmless. Peaceful even. You feel strong, independent, you don't need anyone. You're managing life on your own terms. Until slowly, that strength becomes silence. That independence becomes numbness, and what once felt like freedom begins to feel like floating, unanchored. That's how the descent begins, not with a breakdown, but with a slow forgetting. You forget what it's like to laugh with someone who knows your history. You forget how it feels to be interrupted by someone who actually sees you. You forget the rhythm of connection, until it feels unfamiliar, awkward, like a language you once spoke but no longer trust yourself to use. The real danger of isolation isn't the loneliness, it's the erosion, the slow decay of confidence, of curiosity, of the self that once reached out to the world with questions, with ideas, with care. It can happen to anyone, even the most introspective, the most self-aware, even those who love solitude the most. And it's easy to miss because it doesn't look like suffering. It looks like stillness. You cancel plans. You let texts go unanswered. You tell yourself you're just tired, just busy, just over it. But deep down, a voice is whispering, you're disappearing, not all at once. Just a little more each day. That's how the quiet becomes a trap. Emily Dickinson once said, "The soul should always stand ajar." That line matters more than most people realize. Ajar, not wide open, not slammed shut, just open enough to let something unexpected in. Connection doesn't demand you throw your doors open to the world. It just asks that you don't seal them off forever, because the longer they stay closed, the harder they are to open. And here's the paradox. The more time you spend alone, the harder it becomes to admit you don't want to be, because the world has already labeled you. Independent, strong, the quiet one who doesn't need anyone. But even the quiet ones want to be heard. Even the strong ones want to be held. Even the independent ones want to feel chosen, not just tolerated. And if that's you, if you've started to feel more ghost than guest in your own life, this is not where your story ends. Because the doors you closed are yours to open again, one at a time, slowly, gently, with the kind of care only an introvert knows how to give. The cost of losing the balance isn't just disconnection, it's forgetting who you were before the silence became your shelter. And the way back isn't loud, it's not a leap, it's a step. A text sent, a coffee accepted, a moment shared. The same way you drifted away, slowly you can drift back. One small act of re-entry at a time. Because you were never meant to vanish, you were meant to return. There's a stillness you reach when you stop apologizing for what you need, when you stop trying to be louder, faster, more social than your soul can carry, when you stop chasing approval for how well you hide your quiet nature, when you finally look in the mirror and think, not what's wrong with me, but this is who I am. That's when the paradox doesn't vanish. It makes sense. You are someone who craves solitude and connection in equal measure, who values silence but longs for understanding, who wants space and wants someone to share that space with. That isn't a flaw, that isn't confusion, that's humanity, lived deeply. The goal isn't to fix that tension, it's to live inside it, awake. You can write poems alone and still want someone to read them. You can disappear for a weekend and still miss the sound of another voice. You can sit with your own thoughts and still feel the ache to be held in someone else's. That's not contradiction, that's depth, and depth is the soil where everything meaningful grows. Michael Collins knew that feeling better than most. While the world watched two men walk the moon, he stayed behind, alone, orbiting above a silent world of dust and rock, out of radio contact, cut off even from mission control. For that stretch of time, he was the most alone human in the history of our species. And yet, he didn't report fear or sadness. He spoke of clarity, exaltation, a strange kind of peace, because he knew, even in that cosmic silence, he wasn't disconnected. He was part of something larger, something purposeful. He was never truly alone. He was exactly where he needed to be. That's the kind of solitude worth striving for, not the kind that breaks you down, the kind that builds you back up. Not absence, but alignment, not loneliness, but presence. A solitude that connects you more deeply to yourself, so you can connect more honestly with others. The quiet path to wholeness is not walked in a straight line. It curves, it retreats, it reaches. And sometimes it stands still long enough for someone else to catch up and walk beside you. You don't have to explain that path to everyone. Most won't get it, but someone will. And when they do, you'll know, because they won't try to fix your silence. They'll sit in it with you. They'll see that your stillness isn't emptiness. its depth. And they'll respect it even as they hold your hand. You won't need to shout, you won't need to perform, you'll just need to be. And in that moment, the paradox ends, because you'll realize that you were never just one thing. You were always both. Solitude and connection, silence and longing, reflection and belonging. And if this helped you understand yourself a little better, or reminded you of someone who walks that same quiet path, don't keep it to yourself, share it. Someone else is carrying the same paradox, and maybe, just maybe, this is the message they've been waiting to hear. Let your silence speak, let your truth echo, and let them know they are not alone.